Her husband disappeared during their honeymoon. 7 years later, she walked into a bakery and saw him with a new family. But listen closely, because today's story carries a warning. Imagine running for 7 years. Imagine faking your own death, leaving your wife to face the police and the press alone, all to build a perfect, simple life in a hidden village. You think you've escaped. You think you've won. But you don't know that while you were playing dead, the woman you abandoned was building an empire. You don't know that the very ground you were standing on, she just bought it. And you certainly don't know about the letter your father left in his will, a letter that only opens if you ever come back from the grave. Today, the ghost stops haunting and starts hunting. Hi, my beautiful story family. Welcome home to Mr. James Stories. Before we step into the storm of today's narrative, I need to check on your heart. How is your spirit holding up right now? I know the weight of the world can sometimes feel heavy on your shoulders, pressing down until it's hard to breathe. So, I pray that right now, in this moment, peace is washing over you. May any anxiety you are carrying be replaced by a quiet, unshakable strength. You are precious to this family. If you are ready to leave the noise behind and walk with me, drop a heart in the comments so I know we are connected. Let's begin with love, always. The rain in Saint Savon didn't fall. It assaulted the ancient cobblestones, turning the narrow French streets into rivers of gray slate and cold mud. It was the kind of weather that drove tourists back to their hotels and locals into the warm, yeast-scented embrace of the nearest cafe. But Isara Valerius did not mind the rain. In fact, she preferred it. It matched the temperature of her own soul. She stepped out of the black town car, her Italian leather boots making a sharp, authoritative click against the pavement. Her bodyguard, a mountain of a man named Elias, immediately opened a massive umbrella over her, shielding her cashmere coat from the deluge. Isara didn't look at him. She was looking at the small, glowing storefront ahead of them. Le Petit Matin, the Morning Star. It was a quaint, pitiful little thing. Peeling blue paint, flower boxes that were currently drowning in the downpour, and a bell above the door that looked rusted. It was exactly the kind of establishment her conglomerate, the Valerius Group, usually crushed under the weight of a redevelopment contract before breakfast. But Isara wasn't here to crush it. Not yet. She was here to buy the entire block, and this bakery was the stubborn holdout that was delaying her return to New York. "Wait here, Elias," she whispered, her voice low and smooth, like polished glass. "Madam, the acquisition team said the owner is difficult," Elias noted, his eyes scanning the empty street. "I have eaten difficult men for lunch for 7 years, Elias. I think I can handle a baker." She pushed open the door. The rusted bell chimed, a cheerful, tinkling sound that felt violently out of place with the storm raging outside. Immediately, Isara was hit by a wall of warmth. The air inside was thick, almost edible, heavy with the scent of rising dough, caramelized sugar, and burnt butter. It was the smell of a simple life, a smell Isara hadn't known since before the merger, before the inheritance, before the yacht in Capri where her life had ended 7 years ago. She brushed the rain from her coat, her eyes adjusting to the golden, amber light of the shop. It was empty of customers. Behind the glass display case, filled with rows of perfectly glazed fruit tarts and croissants that flaked like gold leaf, a man was working. His back was to her. He was tall, wearing a white apron dusted with flour over a simple gray t-shirt. His shoulders were broad, moving with a rhythmic, practiced cadence as he piped frosting onto a tray of cinnamon rolls. Isara felt a strange, cold prickle at the base of her neck. It wasn't recognition, not yet. It was just a ghost of a sensation. A familiarity in the way he stood, the way he leaned his weight on his left leg. One moment, the man called out, not turning around. His voice was warm, rich, and carefree. "The cinnamon needs to cool, or the icing will melt. And tragedy is a melted cinnamon roll, no?" Isara stopped breathing. The world tilted on its axis. The smell of the bakery, yeast and sugar, suddenly soured in her throat. That voice. She had heard that voice scream in joy as he jumped off a cliff into the Mediterranean. She had heard that voice whisper promises in the dark of their honeymoon suite. She had heard that voice in her nightmares every night for 2,555 days. But that was impossible. That voice was dead. That voice was at the bottom of the Tyrrhenian Sea. That voice had left her to be interrogated by the Italian carabinieri for 3 months, accused of pushing her own husband to his death for an inheritance she didn't even want back then. "I can wait," Isara said. She forced the words out past the constriction in her throat. Her voice was unrecognizable, hollow, trembling. The man froze. His hand, holding the piping bag, stopped mid-air. The easy rhythm of the bakery died instantly, replaced by a silence so loud it rang in Isara's ears. Slowly, agonizingly, he turned around. Time didn't just stop, it shattered. Isara felt like she had been punched in the solar plexus. There, standing amidst the flour dust and the smell of cheap coffee, was Caleb. He was older. There were new lines around his eyes, creases etched by smiles she had never seen. His hair was longer, tied back in a messy bun, speckled with white flour. But it was him. It was Caleb Valerius, the man whose funeral she had paid for, the man whose empty casket she had wept over while the tabloids called her the Black Widow of Capri. He looked at her, and the color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. The piping bag slipped from his fingers and splattered onto the floor, a burst of white icing exploding like a gunshot. "Isara," he whispered. It wasn't a greeting. It was the sound of a man watching his worst nightmare walk through the door, wearing a $5,000 coat. Isara couldn't move. Her mind was flashing images like a strobe light. The police boats, the divers surfacing with nothing, the lawyers, the shame, the nights she slept on the bathroom floor because the bed was too big. Then, the back door of the bakery swung open. "Papa, Papa, look." A little boy, maybe 4 years old, ran into the room holding a drawing. He had Caleb's eyes. He had Caleb's nose. And following him was a woman, beautiful, soft, wearing a sundress and a cardigan, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked at Caleb, then at Isara, and smiled a confused, polite smile. "Oh, darling, we have a customer?" the woman asked, walking over to Caleb and placing a hand on his arm, the arm Isara used to cling to. "Caleb, are you okay? You look pale." "Caleb." She called him Caleb. He hadn't even bothered to change his name. Isara looked at the child, then at the woman, then at the man who had let her burn in hell for 7 years while he baked cinnamon rolls in France. The shock in Isara's chest hardened. It crystallized, freezing over the grief, freezing over the confusion, until there was nothing left but a cold, jagged rage. The Ice Queen, the persona she had built to survive the boardroom sharks and the media vultures, slammed into place. She straightened her spine. She adjusted her gloves. She looked at him not as a wife looking at a husband, but as a predator looking at prey. "I'm sorry," Isara said, her voice now steady, lethal, and devoid of any humanity. "I must have the wrong establishment. I was looking for a man who died 7 years ago." Caleb's eyes went wide, pleading, begging her with silence to stop, to not destroy the fragile, fake glass house he had built. "Isara, please," he mouthed, no sound coming out. Isara smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of the owner of the Valerius Group, the woman who signed termination letters with a fountain pen worth more than this entire bakery. "Little did you know," she thought, the words echoing in her mind like a gavel strike, "that dead men don't get to ask for mercy." She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply turned her back on him, the bell chiming cheerfully as she walked back out into the rain. As the door closed, cutting off his view, Isara pulled her phone from her coat pocket. Her hand didn't shake. "Elias," she said as she climbed back into the car, the warmth of the bakery instantly replaced by the cold leather of the interior. "Call the legal team in New York. Tell them to initiate Protocol Lazarus." "Protocol Lazarus, madam?" Elias asked, confused. "We don't have a Protocol Lazarus." Isara looked out the window at the little bakery, at the man staring out the glass with terror in his eyes. "We do now," she whispered. "And tell them to buy the building. I want to be his landlord by morning." The moment the heavy door of the town car clicked shut, sealing Isara away from the rain and the sight of the man in the window, the Ice Queen shattered. She didn't scream. Screaming was for people who believed anyone was listening. Instead, Isara bent forward, pressing her forehead against the cold leather of the seat in front of her, gasping for air as if the atmosphere in the car had suddenly turned to vacuum. Her hands, still gloved in Italian leather, clawed at her own chest, trying to rip out the sudden, agonizing expansion of her heart. It wasn't just shock. It was the violent rewriting of history. For 7 years, she had mourned a tragedy. Now, in the span of 30 seconds, that tragedy had mutated into a farce. A joke. A cruel, elaborate prank played on her by the man she had loved more than her own dignity. "Madam," Elias asked from the front seat, his eyes watching her in the rearview mirror, filled with the concern he usually reserved for assassination attempts. "Do you need a doctor?" "I need..." Silence. Isara choked out, her voice raw. She closed her eyes, and instantly, she wasn't in a luxury sedan in France. She was back in the metal chair, the one bolted to the floor in the Guardia di Finanza station in Naples. The memory hit her with the force of a physical blow. She could smell it, the stale cigarette smoke, the bleach that didn't quite cover the scent of unwashed bodies, the bitter espresso on the detective's breath. She remembered the light, a single, buzzing fluorescent tube that flickered like a dying moth. She remembered the way Detective Rossi had leaned across the table, his eyes flat and devoid of sympathy. "The sea does not just take experienced swimmers, Signora Valerius," Rossi had said, tapping a photograph of the empty yacht railing. "And husbands do not just vanish from calm waters unless they are helped, or unless they are running." He fell. Isara had whispered, her skin gray with shock, wrapped in a blanket that scratched her sunburned shoulders. "He went for a night swim. He must have cramped. He fell." "Or perhaps," Rossi continued, sliding a bank statement across the metal table, the sound of paper on steel screeching like a knife, "he was worth more to you dead. The Valerius Trust is substantial. $50 million upon his death. That buys a lot of silence, no?" Isara remembered the humiliation that followed. The tabloids calling her the Black Widow. The freezing of her assets. The way Caleb's mother, Beatrix, had spat at her outside the courthouse, calling her a gold digger, a murderer, a whore. Isara had stood there, taking it all, believing she deserved the pain because she had failed to save him. She had spent her nights praying to a God she didn't believe in, begging for Caleb to walk through the door, begging for it to be a mistake. Little did she know, while she was begging God, Caleb was likely already in France, learning how to knead dough and forgetting her name. The car hit a bump, snapping Isara back to the rainy street in Saint-Savon. She pulled herself upright, wiping a single, angry tear from her cheek before it could ruin her foundation. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back was not the scared girl from the interrogation room. That girl had died in Naples. The woman who remained was forged in the fire of accusation. "Elias," she said, her voice regaining its razor-sharp edge. "How fast can legal draft a commercial acquisition contract? For a bakery? An hour, madam. Maybe less if we waive the inspection." "Waive it," Isara commanded, staring at the blurred lights of the passing village. "I don't care if the foundation is rotting. In fact, I hope it is. I want to own the mortgage, the land, and the air he breathes by the time he finishes frosting those cinnamon rolls." She unlocked her phone, scrolling past the background image, a simple black screen, because she had stopped keeping photos of Caleb years ago, and dialed her chief financial officer in New York. "Isara," the voice answered on the first ring. "It's 4 a.m. here. Is the deal done?" "The deal has changed, Marcus," Isara said, her thumb tracing the line of her pearl necklace, a nervous habit she hadn't broken. "I'm sending you an address in Saint-Savon. I need you to buy the debt. All of it. The business loan, the personal lien, the supplier credits. If he owes money to the milkman, I want to own the cow." "Isara, that's hostile. Even for us. Who is this guy?" Isara looked out the window as the car turned the corner, the little blue bakery disappearing from view. "Nobody," she whispered. "Just a ghost who forgot to stay dead." By the time Isara reached her suite at the Hotel de la Cite, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and cold. But inside Isara's room, the atmosphere was electric with the hum of high-speed data transfers and the quiet violence of forensic accounting. She sat at the antique mahogany desk, a glass of untouched sparkling water beside her. Her laptop screen glowed with the life of the man who called himself Jean-Luc. It was pathetic. It was infuriating. It was brilliant. He didn't even try hard, Isara murmured to herself, scrolling through the credit report her team had hacked in 10 minutes. Caleb, or Jean-Luc, had built a life on a foundation of sand. The bakery, Le Petit Matin, was not the charming, rustic success story it appeared to be. It was hemorrhaging money. The loans were high interest, likely predatory, taken out from local banks that didn't ask too many questions about a man with no history prior to 7 years ago. He's drowning, she realized, a cruel smile touching her lips. He ran away from a billion-dollar empire to go bankrupt selling croissants. It was poetic justice, but Isara wasn't interested in poetry. She was interested in leverage. She opened the file labeled Mortgage Holder. It was a small regional bank in Lyon. They were likely risk-averse. They would be terrified of a default. They would be thrilled to sell a distressed asset to a multinational conglomerate for cash up front. Her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "We have the bank on the line," Marcus said, sounding wide awake now. "They're confused, Isara. They want to know why Valerius Group wants a failing bakery in the middle of nowhere. They're asking if we're building a resort. Tell them we appreciate the historic architecture." Isara lied effortlessly. "Tell them we'll pay 20% above the principal if they fax the transfer of ownership within the hour. If they wait until morning, the offer drops to zero and we build a Starbucks next door to drive him out of business." Ruthless, Marcus chuckled. "I love it. Sending the paperwork now." Isara hung up and leaned back in her chair. She looked around the opulent suite, the silk drapes, the crystal chandelier, the silence that cost €2,000 a night. This was the life Caleb had run from. He had hated the expectations, the pressure, the constant scrutiny of being a Valerius. He used to tell her, late at night, that he wished he could just be normal. He had gotten his wish. He was normal now. He was a normal man with a normal wife, a normal child, and a crushing, normal amount of debt. And soon, he would have a very abnormal landlord. Isara stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the sleepy village. Somewhere down there, in a small house with peeling paint, Caleb was probably holding his new wife, telling her that the woman in the bakery was just a mistake, a confused tourist. He was probably promising her that everything was fine. "You should have stayed dead, my love," Isara whispered to the glass, her breath fogging the pain. "Because the widow you left behind." She learned how to bite. A ping from her laptop drew her attention back to the desk. A new email from legal. Subject: Asset acquisition confirmed. Eli Petit Matin status. Owner: Isara Valerius. It was done. She owned him. But as she stared at the screen, a second notification popped up. This one was not from her team. It was a secure alert from a private server, the dead man's switch Caleb's father, Magnus, had set up years ago. Alert: biometric match detected. Location: Saint-Savon, France. Protocol: initiate. Isara froze. She hadn't triggered that. Her security team hadn't triggered that. Magnus. Even from the grave, the old man was watching. He had cameras, facial recognition software scanning the globe for his wayward son, waiting for a ghost to show his face. And today, when Caleb turned around in that bakery, a camera somewhere, maybe on the street, maybe in the ATM across the road, had seen him. Isara reached into her purse and pulled out the worn, sealed envelope she had carried for 7 years. The one Magnus had given her on his deathbed. "If he returns," Magnus had rasped, clutching her hand with a grip like iron. "You give him this. Not before. And you make him read it while you watch." Isara tapped the envelope against her palm. The game had just changed. She wasn't just a landlord anymore. She was the executioner Caleb's father had appointed from beyond the veil. She picked up the hotel phone. "Concierge," she said. "I need a courier to deliver a notice of eviction to Le Petit Matin. First thing in the morning." "Eviction, madam? But the tenants, it is very sudden." "Life is sudden," Isara replied. "Just ask my husband." The morning sun in Saint-Savon was deceptively cheerful, casting long, golden shadows across the village square that betrayed nothing of the storm that had passed, or the one that was about to break. Isara did not sleep. Sleep was a luxury for people with clear consciences or forgotten pasts. Instead, she spent the hours before dawn reviewing the acquisition papers, her eyes scanning lines of legalese that effectively stripped Caleb of his sanctuary. At 8 a.m., she stood in front of the full-length mirror in her suite. She chose a suit of charcoal wool, tailored so sharply it could cut glass. Her hair was pulled back into a severe chignon, exposing the diamond studs in her ears, the ones Caleb had given her for their first anniversary. She wore them not out of sentiment, but as a reminder that diamonds are cold, hard, and formed under crushing pressure. Just like her. Elias, she called out as she walked into the sitting room. Is the car ready? Waiting downstairs, madam. And the courier confirmed delivery of the notice 10 minutes ago. Good. Isara pulled on her leather gloves. Let's go introduce ourselves to the new tenants. The drive to Le Petit Matin was short. The village was waking up. Shopkeepers were sweeping their stoops, the smell of fresh baguettes wafting through the air. It was idyllic. It was nauseating. When the town car pulled up to the bakery, the open sign was flipped to closed. The blinds were drawn. Isara stepped out of the car, ignoring Elias's offered arm. She walked to the door and knocked. Free sharp raps. Silence. She knocked again, harder. Mr. Valerius, she called out, using his real name loud enough for the street to hear. Or do you prefer Jean-Luc today? The lock tumbled. The door opened a crack, revealing Caleb's face. He looked wrecked. His eyes were red-rimmed, his skin sallow. He was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, stained with flour and what looked like coffee. Please, he hissed, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Keep your voice down. Mia is upstairs. Mia, Isara repeated, testing the name like a poison on her tongue. The woman living in my building. Caleb flinched. Your building? What are you talking about? Isara pushed past him, forcing the door open with a strength that surprised him. She stepped into the bakery. It was dark, smelling of stale sugar and fear. She walked to the counter, running a gloved finger along the wood. I bought the loan, Caleb. I bought the lien. I bought the ground under your feet while you were sleeping. She turned to face him. I am your landlord. And as of this morning, you are in default. Caleb slumped against the doorframe, running a hand through his messy hair. Why are you doing this, Isara? You have everything. You have the company, the money, the life. Why come here? Why destroy this? Because you didn't just leave, Caleb, Isara said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You let me take the fall. You let them accuse me of murder. You let your mother spit in my face. You let the world call me a black widow while you played house in a French postcard. I was scared. Caleb's voice cracked. I couldn't handle it, Isara. The pressure, my father. I was suffocating. I thought you'd be better off without me. You were always stronger than me. I knew you'd survive. Survival is not a life. Isara snapped. I didn't want to survive you. I wanted to live with you. Before Caleb could respond, footsteps creaked on the wooden stairs. Jean-Luc, a soft voice called out. Who is it? Is it the bank? Mia appeared at the top of the stairs, holding the little boy's hand. She looked tired, her eyes filled with worry. When she saw Isara standing in the middle of the shop, impeccable, terrifying, and undeniably out of place, her confusion deepened. Oh, Mia said, freezing. You're the customer from yesterday. Caleb spun around, panic flaring in his eyes. Mia, go back upstairs. Please. This is just business. It's a supplier issue. A supplier? Isara laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Is that what I am? She looked up at Mia. The woman was innocent in this. Just another casualty of Caleb's cowardice. But in war, innocence is not a shield. My name is Isara Valerius, Isara said, her voice projecting clearly. I am the CEO of the Valerius Group, and I am here to inform you that your husband. She paused, letting the word hang in the air like a guillotine blade. Your husband has some very significant debts that are now due. Mia looked from Isara to Caleb. She saw the terror in Caleb's eyes. She saw the guilt. And slowly, the realization dawned on her face. Jean-Luc, Mia whispered. Who is she really? Caleb looked at Isara, begging. Isara, don't. Please. Not in front of Leo. Isara looked at the boy Leo. He was clinging to his mother's leg, watching the adults with wide, fearful eyes. He was innocent. For a second, the Ice Queen cracked. Isara remembered what it felt like to be collateral damage. We have business to discuss, Isara said, turning back to Caleb. Private business. Come to my hotel in 1 hour. If you don't, she looked at Mia again. Then I will have to explain to your wife exactly why her bakery is being repossessed. She turned and walked to the door. 1 hour, Caleb, she said over her shoulder. Don't make me come back. I might bring the press next time. Isara walked out of the bakery and into the bright morning sun, but she felt none of its warmth. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Seeing the boy, seeing Leo, that was a complication she hadn't anticipated. Caleb had a son he clearly adored, a son he was raising in this lie. She got into the car, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled the door shut. "Back to the hotel, madam?" Elias asked. "Yes," Isara said. She took a deep breath, forcing the trembling to stop. "And Elias?" "Yes, madam. Contact the private investigator team. I want to know everything about the child. Birth certificate, paternity, everything." "You suspect?" "I suspect Caleb is a liar," Isara said, staring at the closed blinds of the bakery. "And liars usually tell more than one lie." Back in the hotel room, Isara paced. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a sick, heavy feeling in her stomach. She had him. She had him cornered. She could destroy his life with a single phone call to CNN. Billionaire heir found alive in France. It would be the story of the decade. He would be hounded, sued, possibly jailed for fraud. But was that enough? Was simply destroying him enough to pay for 7 years of hell? Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "Marcus, funds transferred. You own the debt." "But Isara, the bank mentioned something odd. The deed to the bakery isn't just in Jean-Luc's name. It's co-signed." Isara frowned. "Isara, co-signed by whom? The wife?" "Marcus, no. By a trust. The Aries Trust. Does that mean anything to you?" Isara stopped pacing. "Aries. Magnus Valerius was born in April. He was an Aries. He was obsessed with astrology, claiming it was the only way to predict the markets." "No," Isara whispered. "That's impossible. Magnus had died 3 years ago. Caleb had been dead for 7. If Magnus had co-signed a loan for a bakery in France, that meant Magnus knew. That meant Caleb hadn't just run away. That meant his father had helped him. That meant Isara hadn't just been abandoned by her husband. She had been betrayed by the only man who had stood by her during the aftermath. The man who held her hand at the memorial service. The man who left her the company. The man who gave her the envelope. Isara ran to her purse and pulled out the sealed letter again. She stared at Magnus' handwriting on the front. "To be opened only in the event of my son's return." She had thought it was a contingency plan. A safeguard. But if the Aries Trust was real, this letter wasn't a safeguard. It was a confession. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Madam," Elias's voice came through the wood. Mr. Valerius is here." Isara shoved the letter into her jacket pocket. She smoothed her hair. She put the Ice Queen mask back on. "Send him in," she said. The door opened, and Caleb walked in. He looked small in the opulent room. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. Isara stood by the window, silhouetted against the light. She didn't offer him a seat. "The Aries Trust," she said, cutting straight to the bone. "Explain it." Caleb froze. The color drained from his face again. How did you find that?" "I own your debt, Caleb. I see everything." "Did your father know?" Caleb looked down at the carpet. "Yes," he whispered. He found me. About a year after I left. He hired a PI. They tracked me down. And he didn't tell me," Isara said, her voice shaking with quiet fury. "He watched me mourn you. He watched me almost go to prison for you. And he said nothing. He wanted to protect the company," Caleb said weakly. "He said if the world knew I ran away, the stock would tank. He said it was better if I stayed dead. So he helped me set up the bakery. He gave me enough to start over, on the condition that I never contact you, that I never come back." Isara felt like the floor was tilting. The betrayal was absolute. The 2 men she had loved most in the world had conspired to make her a widow. "Get out," she whispered. "Isara, please, the eviction notice." "I can't leave. Mia, she doesn't know anything. She thinks I'm an orphan. She thinks I have no family. If you take the bakery, we lose everything. Get out." Isara screamed, grabbing a crystal vase from the table and hurling it at the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, the crash echoing like a gunshot. Caleb flinched, terrified. He had never seen her lose control. Not once. "Isara, I'm sorry," he stammered, backing toward the door. "I'm so sorry. You don't know the meaning of the word," Isara hissed, tears finally streaming down her face. "But you will. By the time I'm done with you, you will pray for the silence of the grave you faked." She turned her back on him. She heard the door click shut. Isara stood in the silence, surrounded by shattered glass. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the letter. Her hand was trembling so violently she almost dropped it. Magnus knew. He knew everything. She ripped the envelope open. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored stationery. Magnus' handwriting was jagged, written in the final days before the cancer took his hands. Isara, if you are reading this, then my coward of a son has resurfaced. I am sorry. I am sorry I didn't tell you. I am sorry I let you suffer. I found him a year after he ran. I wanted to drag him back. I wanted to force him to face you. But when I saw him, saw how pathetic he was, how desperate to be small, I realized he would only destroy you if he returned. He would drain you. He would anchor you to his mediocrity. You were always the son I wanted, Isara. You have the fire. You have the steel. So I made a deal with the devil. I paid for his silence. I bought his new life so he would stay out of yours. But I knew, deep down, that a man who runs once will run again. And eventually, he might run back to the money. So here is the final key. The Aries trust that funds his bakery? It is a revocable trust. And in my final will, the codicil I kept secret from even the lawyers until this moment, I named the sole trustee. It's you. You control his money, Isara. You control his bakery. You control the roof over his head. I give him to you. Do with him what you will. Be the justice he escaped. Love, Magnus. Isara lowered the letter. A laugh bubbled up in her throat, a dark, hysterical sound. Magnus hadn't betrayed her. He had weaponized her. He had known that one day Caleb might resurface, and he had ensured that when he did, Isara wouldn't just be his victim. She would be his god. She walked to the desk and picked up the phone. Elias, she said, her voice steady again. Get the legal team on the line and tell them to look up the bylaws of the Aries Trust. Yes, madam. And Elias? Cancel my flight home. I think I'm going to stay in St. Savon for a while. I have some renovations to oversee. Isara walked to the window and looked down at the village. The rain had started again, washing the streets clean. But up here, in the tower, Isara was dry. She was safe. And for the first time in 7 years, she was in complete control. She wasn't just acquiring a bakery. She was acquiring retribution. And the price was going to be everything Caleb had left. Isara did not evict him the next morning. Eviction was too quick, too messy, and far too merciful. Instead, she decided to inspect her new asset. At 10 a.m., Le Petit Matin was bustling. The rain had cleared, and the locals were out, eager for their morning pastries. The smell of fresh brioche and strong coffee spilled out onto the street, a siren song of domestic bliss. Isara walked through it like a knife cutting through silk. She wore white today, a cream-colored power suit that cost more than the annual GDP of the village. Paired with sunglasses she didn't bother to remove. When she pushed open the door, the bell chimed. Caleb, who was laughing with a customer at the register, looked up. The laugh died in his throat, choking him. Isara walked straight to the counter. She didn't look at Caleb. She looked past him, scanning the shelves, the peeling paint on the crown molding, the ancient espresso machine that was hissing like a dying steam engine. The espresso machine needs to be replaced, Isara said, her voice carrying over the low hum of conversation. And the crown molding is a liability. If that paint has lead, we are looking at a lawsuit. Caleb stood paralyzed, a bag of croissants halfway to the customer's hand. Madam, the customer asked, confused. Finish the transaction, Mr. Valerius, Isara commanded, finally turning her gaze to him. Behind her dark glasses, her eyes were unreadable. Don't let me interrupt commerce. I'm just the owner. Caleb's hands shook as he handed over the bag. The customer glanced from him to Isara, sensing the tension, and hurriedly left. What are you doing? Caleb hissed, leaning over the counter. You said you were going to evict us. I changed my mind, Isara said, pulling a leather notebook from her bag. She opened it, uncapping a gold fountain pen. My late father-in-law taught me that one should never discard an asset without first assessing its value. And since I am now the trustee of the Aries Trust, and by extension, the owner of this building and the loan shark holding your debt, I decided to see what exactly my money has been funding for 7 years. Caleb gripped the counter, his knuckles white. You know about the trust? I am the trust, Caleb, she whispered, leaning in closer. The scent of her perfume, expensive, cold, floral, clashed violently with the warm yeast of the bakery. Magnus left it to me. He left you to me. Before Caleb could process the horror of that statement, the kitchen door swung open. Mia walked out, carrying a tray of tarts. She smiled when she saw Isara, a genuine, warm smile that made Isara's stomach churn. Oh, You came back, Mia said, wiping her hands on her apron. I'm so glad. Jean-Luc said there was a misunderstanding with the supplier yesterday. I hope everything is resolved. Isara looked at Mia. She was soft. She was kind. She was everything Isara had been before the interrogation room hardened her into diamond. Not a misunderstanding, my dear, Isara said, her voice smooth as velvet. A restructuring. I represent the new ownership group. We bought the building's debt yesterday. Mia's eyes widened. She looked at Caleb. Jean-Luc, you didn't tell me we had new owners. I just found out, Caleb stammered, his eyes darting to Isara, begging her silently. We are very hands-on, Isara continued, turning her attention back to the shelves. In fact, I'll be conducting a full audit of the business, starting with the accounts. I assume they are in order? My predecessor, Mr. Magnus, was quite lenient. I am not. Mia looked worried. The accounts are, well, Jean-Luc handles the money. I just bake. Then Jean-Luc has nothing to worry about, Isara said, smiling that terrifying, shark-like smile. Unless, of course, he has been mismanaging the funds. But a man who values his family wouldn't do that, would he? She snapped her notebook shut. I'll be in the corner table, Isara announced. I need an espresso. Try not to burn it this time. She walked to the table, sat down, and watched. She watched Caleb try to work while his hands trembled. She watched Mia cast worried glances at her husband. She watched the perfect little life they had built begin to develop hairline fractures. Little did Mia know, the woman drinking coffee in the corner wasn't just a landlord. She was the wife her husband had murdered his old life to escape. The financial strangulation began at noon. Isara sat at the corner table, her laptop open. She logged into the Ares Trust portal. The access codes provided in Magnus' letter worked perfectly. The interface was simple. It showed a monthly stipend transfer of 8,000 euros to an account labeled Jean-Luc Moreau. It was a generous allowance for a dead man. It paid for the bakery supplies, the mortgage, the quaint little house, the clothes on Leo's back. It was the four-drip keeping Caleb's fantasy alive. Isara hovered her cursor over the status button. She thought about the nights she had spent screaming into her pillow. She thought about the way the press had camped on her lawn. She thought about the loneliness that felt like a physical weight in her chest. She clicked suspend. Across the room, the phone at the register rang. Caleb picked it up. Hello? Yes, this is Jean-Luc. He listened for a moment, and Isara watched the blood drain from his face. Declined? That's impossible. There must be a mistake. Run it again. He paused, listening. Insufficient funds? No. Listen, I have a standing transfer. Hello? Hello? He slammed the phone down. He looked across the room at Isara. She didn't look up from her screen. She simply took a sip of her espresso. He rushed over to her table, abandoning a line of 3 customers. You cut it off, he whispered harshly, leaning down. The supply order for next week. The card was declined. Isara, we need flour. We need butter. If we can't bake, we close. Isara typed a few words into an email, ignoring him. Isara, lower your voice, she said, finally looking up. You are disturbing my workspace. You can't just cut off the money. My father, he promised. Your father is dead, Caleb. And the new trustee has decided that the Ares Trust is overextended. We are pivoting our investment strategy. She closed her laptop. I suggest you find another revenue stream. Maybe you could sell the story of how you faked your death to a tabloid? I hear they pay well for scandals involving the Valerius family. Caleb recoiled as if she had slapped him. You want me to beg? I don't want you to do anything, Isara said calmly. I simply don't care what you do. That is the luxury of being the one who stayed, Caleb. I don't have to hide. You do. Mia will ask questions, he said, his voice trembling with desperation. If the money stops, she'll know something is wrong. Then tell her the truth, Isara challenged. Tell her you're a billionaire heir who ran away because he was too scared to be a man. Tell her she's living on charity from the wife you abandoned. Go ahead. I'll wait. Caleb stared at her, defeated. He couldn't do it. He was a coward 7 years ago, and he was a coward now. Please, he whispered. Just give me time. Give me a week to figure something out. Isara checked her diamond watch. I'll give you until the supply truck arrives tomorrow morning, she said. If you can't pay them, I suppose Le Petit Matin will have to sell day-old bread. Tragedy, no? By evening, the tension in the bakery was thick enough to choke on. Isara had left hours ago, leaving behind a silence that screamed. Caleb was in the back office, frantically typing on his computer, trying to move money from personal savings that didn't exist. Mia stood in the doorway, holding a sleeping Leo on her shoulder. "Jean-Luc?" she asked softly. Caleb jumped, slamming the laptop shut. "Mia? I didn't hear you." "Who is she?" Mia asked. Her voice wasn't accusatory, just tired and frightened. "That woman. She looks at you like she knows you. And you look at her like you're afraid of her. She's just corporate." Caleb lied, the taste of it bitter on his tongue. "She's from the company that bought the loan. They're aggressive. They want to squeeze us out so they can redevelop the block." "She said she's the trustee," Mia said, stepping into the room. "She said she controls the money." "Jean-Luc, why was the supply card declined?" "I got a text from the vendor." Caleb stood up, rubbing his face with his hands. The walls were closing in. For 7 years, he had lived in a bubble of safety bought by his father's guilt. Now, Isara had popped it, and the air was rushing out. "It's a banking error," he said, walking over to hug her. He buried his face in her hair, smelling the vanilla shampoo she used. It smelled like safety. It smelled like the lie he wanted to keep living. "I'll fix it, Mia. I promise. I won't let her take this from us." Mia pulled back, looking him in the eyes. "She called you Caleb." Caleb's heart stopped. "What?" "When she first came in yesterday, before the storm really started. I heard her through the door. She called you Caleb." "You misheard," Caleb said quickly, too quickly. She said collapse." She was talking about the business collapsing. Mia didn't look convinced. She looked at the man she had married, the man she shared a bed with, and for the first time, Caleb saw doubt in her eyes. It was a small crack, barely a hairline fracture, but Isara had put it there. "Okay," Mia whispered, though her eyes remained clouded. "Okay, Jean-Luc. But fix it, please. For Leo." She turned and carried their son upstairs. Caleb sank back into his chair. He looked at the blank screen of his laptop. He had €0 in the operating account. The trust was frozen. The suppliers were coming at 8 a.m. And the woman who held the keys to his shackles was staying at the Hotel de la Cite, probably drinking champagne and watching his life burn. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a small, prepaid burner phone he kept for emergencies, a habit from the early days of running. He dialed the only number he knew by heart. "Mother," he whispered when the line connected. "It's me. I'm in trouble. She found me." On the other end of the line, in a penthouse in Manhattan, Beatrix Valerius dropped her crystal glass. It shattered, much like the piece of Saint Savon was about to. "Caleb," Beatrix gasped. "You're alive." "She found me, Mom. Isara. She's here. And she has Dad's trust. You have to come. You have to help me." Little did he know, calling his mother was like inviting a dragon to a village that was already on fire. The supply truck arrived at 7:45 a.m., its air brakes hissing a sharp, discordant note into the quiet morning of Saint Savon. It was a large, rumbling beast of a vehicle, delivering the lifeblood of any bakery. 50-kilo sacks of flour, crates of Brittany butter, and gallons of fresh cream. Caleb stood on the curb, wiping his flour-dusted hands on his apron, forcing a smile he didn't feel. He looked like a man facing a firing squad, not a delivery driver. Across the street, sitting at a wrought iron table outside a rival cafe, Isara watched over the rim of her porcelain cup. She wore oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf tied loosely around her neck to ward off the morning chill. She wasn't drinking the coffee. It was too acidic compared to what she was used to in Manhattan. She was simply consuming the spectacle. "Bonjour, Jean-Luc," the driver shouted, hopping down from the cab with a clipboard. "Big order today. The weekend rush is coming, eh?" "Yes, Henri, big order," Caleb said, his voice tight. He reached for the clipboard, but his hand hovered over it. "Actually, there's a problem with the bank transfer. The system is down." Henri frowned, tapping his pen against his thigh. "Down? Again?" "Jean-Luc," the boss said, "no more credit. The last invoice is still outstanding." I know," Caleb pleaded, his voice dropping to a whisper so the pedestrians wouldn't hear. "It's just a glitch. The new ownership, they're transitioning the accounts. I can pay you cash for half today and the rest on Monday." "Cash?" Henri scoffed. "You have €3,000 in cash in that register?" Caleb went silent. Isara watched his shoulders slump. He didn't have 3,000 euros. He barely had 300. The Aries trust had been his only loan, and Isara had pinched the tube shut. I can't unload, Jean-Luc, Henri said, climbing back into the cab. I'm sorry. Boss's orders. Henri, please. We have nothing for tomorrow. No flour, no yeast. The engine roared to life, drowning out his begging. The truck pulled away, belching a cloud of gray exhaust that enveloped Caleb, leaving him standing alone on the curb with empty hands. Isara waited until the truck turned the corner. Then, she stood up, smoothed her skirt, and walked across the street. Caleb saw her coming. He didn't run this time. He just looked at her with eyes full of hate and exhaustion. Are you happy? He spat. Leo likes brioche on Saturdays. Now I can't make it. Then buy him a brioche from the supermarket, Isara said coolly. Like normal people do. She stepped closer, invading his personal space. This is what reality feels like, Caleb. It's heavy. It's embarrassing. It's uncertain. It's everything you left me to deal with when the police seized our accounts because they thought I killed you. I didn't think they'd do that, Caleb muttered, looking away. Little did you know, Isara whispered, the phrase hanging in the air like smoke, that ignorance is not a defense in court, nor is it a currency I accept for rent. She bypassed him and pushed open the door to the bakery. The shelves were already looking sparse. Mia was behind the counter, arranging the few pastries they had left. She looked up, hopeful at the sound of the door. Then her face fell when she saw Isara. Did the truck come? Mia asked, her voice trembling. The truck had a schedule conflict, Isara lied smoothly. But don't worry, my dear. As the new owner, I've arranged for a specialist to come in and review your operations. We need to make sure this business is viable before we invest any more capital. A specialist? Mia asked. Yes, Isara smiled. Me. The audit was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Isara spent the entire day in the bakery. She sat in the corner with her laptop, criticizing the workflow, questioning the ingredient costs, and asking Mia questions that were innocent on the surface but razor-sharp underneath. So, Jean-Luc tells me he's from Lyon, Isara said casually as Mia wiped down a table near her. Is that where you met? Mia paused. No, we met in Nice. He was drifting. He said he needed a fresh start. He'd lost his family in a car accident. Isara's fingers paused on her keyboard. A car accident. A convenient tragedy. It garnered sympathy and explained the lack of relatives at their wedding. How tragic, Isara murmured. To lose everyone at once. No parents. No siblings. No one, Mia said sadly. He said he was the only one left. That's why he holds on to us so tight. He's terrified of losing family again. Isara looked at Caleb, who was aggressively kneading dough in the open kitchen, his back stiff as a board. He could hear every word. He knew Isara was peeling back the layers of his lie, one strip at a time. It's strange, Isara said, taking a sip of water. He has the bearing of someone educated. Someone who grew up with money. Don't you think? He reads a lot, Mia defended him. He's very smart. I'm sure he is, Isara said. It takes a very creative mind to invent a life from scratch. Just then, the back door opened and little Leo ran in, escaping the watchful eye of the nanny Caleb had hired, another expense he couldn't afford. He ran straight for the display case, pressing his nose against the glass. Papa, cookie, Leo squealed. Caleb turned, his face softening instantly. It was the only time the fear left his eyes, when he looked at the boy. He grabbed a cookie and handed it to his son, ruffling his hair. Isara watched them. The resemblance was undeniable. Leo had the Valerius jawline. He had Magnus' nose. He was the heir to a dynasty he didn't know existed, eating a cookie in a bankrupt bakery. Leo turned, noticing Isara watching him. He walked over, fearless in the way only loved children are. Hello, Leo said. Hello, Isara replied, her voice losing its edge for a fraction of a second. You look like a princess, Leo decided. But a sad one. Isara felt a crack in her armor. A hairline fracture in the ice. She reached out, almost involuntarily, and brushed a stray curl from the boy's forehead. I'm not a princess, little one, she whispered. I'm the dragon. Caleb rushed over, scooping Leo up as if Isara's touch was radioactive. Leo, go upstairs. Now. But Papa. Now, Caleb shouted, startling the boy. Leo's lip quivered, and he burst into tears. Mia rushed over, taking the crying child from Caleb's arms. She glared at her husband. Why are you yelling at him? He was just talking. She's busy, Mia. We shouldn't disturb the landlord. Mia looked from Caleb's panicked, sweating face to Isara's cool, unbothered composure. The doubt in her eyes wasn't just a crack anymore. It was a fissure. Something is wrong, Mia said quietly. Jean-Luc, you're acting like a crazy person. And you? She looked at Isara. You're not here to audit us. You're here for him, aren't you? Isara closed her laptop. The seed was planted. Now it just needed rain. I am here for my assets, Isara said, standing up. All of them. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the latch. Oh, and Jean-Luc, she called out. You might want to clean up the shop. I'm expecting a VIP visitor tomorrow. Someone who is very eager to see what you've done with the family legacy. The helicopter didn't land in Saint-Sauvant. There was nowhere for it. Instead, it landed at the private chateau 10 miles away, and a convoy of 3 black SUVs tore through the French countryside like a funeral procession moving at warp speed. Isara was waiting in the village square. She had checked out of the hotel and was sitting on a public bench directly across from the bakery. She checked her watch. 11 a.m. Right on time. The SUVs screeched to a halt in front of Le Petit Matin, blocking the narrow street and causing a local delivery van to honk aggressively. The drivers ignored it. The doors of the lead vehicle flew open, and security guards spilled out, clearing a path. Then, she emerged. Beatrix Valerius. She was 65 but looked 40, thanks to a team of Swiss surgeons. She wore a fur coat despite the mild weather, sunglasses big enough to eclipse the sun, and an expression of pure, unadulterated panic masked by haughty rage. She didn't see Isara on the bench. She only saw the bakery. Isara watched as Beatrix marched toward the door, her heels clicking on the cobblestones like gunfire. This was the woman who had called Isara a murderer. This was the woman who had testified against her own daughter-in-law to protect the family name. Now, she was about to find out that the family name was frosting cakes in an apron. Beatrix shoved the door open without knocking. Isara stood up and crossed the street, slipping into the bakery just behind the security detail. She wanted a front-row seat. Inside, the scene was frozen. Caleb was behind the counter. Mia was wiping a table. Beatrix stood in the center of the room, removing her sunglasses. She looked at the peeling paint. She looked at the cheap tables. And then she looked at the man in the flour-stained t-shirt. Caleb, she breathed. The word was a prayer and a curse all at once. Caleb dropped a mug. It shattered on the floor, loud and final. Mother! Mia gasped, dropping her rag. Mother? But, you said they were dead. Beatrix ignored Mia. She ignored the mess. She rushed forward, ignoring the flour, and slapped Caleb across the face so hard the sound echoed off the tin ceiling. You stupid, selfish boy! Beatrix screamed, grabbing his face in her hands immediately after hitting him. 7 years. 7 years I mourned you. 7 years I wore black. And you are here? Baking bread. Mom, please. Caleb wept, collapsing into her arms. I couldn't come back. I couldn't. We are leaving, Beatrix commanded, pulling away and snapping her fingers at her security. Grab him. Get his things. We are going to the jet. We will fix this. We will tell the press you were kidnapped. We will spin this. He's not going anywhere. A voice cut through the chaos. Beatrix spun around. She finally saw Isara standing by the door, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. Isara, Beatrix sneered, her lip curling. I should have known you were the one sniffing around. You always were a bloodhound for money. Hello, Beatrix, Isara said calmly. You can take him if you want. But he can't leave the country. And why is that? Beatrix laughed. Because you say so? You're a nobody, Isara. You're a placeholder we tolerated. Isara pulled the folded document from her pocket, the Ares trust deed. Because I own his passport, Isara said. I own his bakery. I own his debt. And thanks to Magnus, I own him. She stepped forward, entering the ring. And Beatrix? If you try to move him, Isara whispered, her eyes flashing with dangerous amusement. I'll release the photos of this happy reunion to the press before your jet wheels are up. Billionaire matriarch helps son fake death. Imagine what that will do to the stock price. Beatrix froze. For the first time in her life, the Dragon of Park Avenue looked at her daughter-in-law and realized she wasn't looking at a victim. She was looking at the executioner. The silence inside Le Petit Matin was no longer just awkward. It was expensive. It smelled of Beatrix's Chanel No. 5, which was currently waging a chemical war against the scent of burnt coffee. Beatrix Valerius did not stay frozen for long. She was a woman who had negotiated hostile takeovers while getting a manicure. She smoothed her fur coat, her eyes darting from Isara to the trembling Caleb, and finally landing on Mia, who was standing by the kitchen door, clutching a dish rag like a shield. "So," Beatrix said, her voice dripping with disdain as she looked Mia up and down. "This is what you traded your birthright for? A shop girl, and what is this place? It looks like a health code violation." "Her name is Mia," Caleb said, his voice weak. "And she's my wife." "Your wife?" Beatrix laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "You are married to Isara, you fool. This," she gestured at Mia with a gloved hand, "is a mistress, a concubine, a complication." Mia took a step back, her face draining of color. She looked at Caleb, waiting for him to roar, to defend her, to throw these intruders out. But Caleb didn't roar. He shrank. He looked at his mother with the eyes of a scolded child. "Mom, please," Caleb whispered. "Don't speak to her like that. I will speak however I please." Beatrix snapped. She turned her back on them, dismissing Mia's existence entirely, and focused her laser sights on Isara. "Fine," Beatrix said, opening her crocodile skin handbag. She pulled out a checkbook. "You want to play games, Isara? Let's play. You own the debt? How much is it?" 200,000. "Free. The principal is 350,000, Isara said calmly, checking her nails. "Peanuts," Beatrix scoffed. She uncapped a gold pen. "I'll write you a check for 500,000. You sign over the deed, the loan, and the trust rights immediately. We take Caleb. We leave this hovel, and you go back to New York and forget you ever saw us." She scribbled the numbers with a flourish, ripped the check from the book, and held it out to Isara. The paper fluttered in the drafty room. "Take it," Beatrix commanded. "It's more profit than you've made in a week. Take it and go." Caleb looked at the check. Hope flared in his eyes. It was pathetic. He actually thought money could fix the hole he had dug in the universe. He looked at Isara, silently begging her to take the money, to sell him back to his mother so he could escape the consequences one more time. Little did he know, Isara had stopped caring about profit the day she identified his empty casket. Isara stepped forward. She took the check from Beatrix's fingers. She looked at the number, €500,000. "You think this is about money?" Isara whispered, looking Beatrix in the eye. "Everything is about money, darling. Don't be naive." Isara smiled. It was the smile of a wolf standing over a trapped lamb. Slowly, deliberately, she tore the check in half, then in quarters, then into confetti. She let the pieces drift to the floor, landing on Caleb's flour-dusted shoes. "I have a net worth of $4 billion, Beatrix," Isara said softly. "I don't need your money. I need your suffering." Beatrix stared at the confetti on the floor, her mouth slightly open. For the first time, she looked unsure. "You can't keep him here," Beatrix hissed. "He's a Valerius. He belongs in New York." "He belongs to the trust," Isara corrected. "And the trust says he stays exactly where he is. If he leaves St. Savon, I revoke the funding. I foreclose on the bakery. I sue him for bigamy. I sue him for fraud. And I leak the story to the New York Times." She turned to Caleb. "You wanted a simple life, Caleb? You wanted to be a baker? Congratulations. You got your wish. You were going to bake bread. Every single day. You were going to wake up at 4 a.m. You were going to knead dough until your hands bleed. You were going to serve customers who don't know your name. And you are going to pay me back every single cent of the debt you owe, with interest." Caleb looked at Isara, horror dawning on him. She wasn't sending him to jail. She was sentencing him to the life he had pretended to love, but stripped of the safety net. She was making his fantasy his prison. "Isara, I can't," Caleb pleaded. "Without the trust allowance, the bakery doesn't make enough profit. We'll starve." "Then work harder," Isara said coldly. "Or ask your mother for a loan." "Oh wait," she held up a finger. "The trust bylaws specifically prohibit the beneficiary from accepting outside capital. If you take a penny from Beatrix, you forfeit the asset." You monster," Beatrix gasped. "This is vindictive. This is justice," Isara replied. "Magnus knew you would try to bail him out. He knew you would try to spoil him again. So he made sure you couldn't." Isara walked to the door, opening it to the street. "Get out, Beatrix," Isara commanded. "Visiting hours are over. Your son has work to do. And if I see your security detail within 10 miles of this village, I call the press." Beatrix looked at Caleb. She looked at the ruined check on the floor. She realized, with terrifying clarity, that she had no power here. The daughter-in-law she had underestimated held all the cards. "This isn't over," Beatrix spat, adjusting her fur. She marched out the door, her heels clicking angrily against the pavement. Her security team scrambled to follow her, leaving the bakery in a sudden, deafening silence. Caleb stood in the middle of the room, shaking. Isara looked at him one last time. "Get back to work, tenant," she said. "Rent is due on the 1st. Isara left the bakery, but she didn't leave the village. She sat in her car, parked just down the street, watching through the tinted windows. She saw Beatrix's convoy speed away in a cloud of dust. She saw the closed sign flip on the bakery door. Inside, the real demolition was beginning. Mia stood by the counter, staring at the man she had called her husband for 5 years. The man she had children with. The man who had just been slapped by a billionaire in a fur coat and scolded by a CEO. "Jean-Luc," Mia whispered, her voice trembling. "Who are you?" "Caleb." "No." "Jean-Luc." "No." Caleb looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Mia, I can explain. It's complicated." "It's not complicated," Mia screamed, startling him. She grabbed a ceramic bowl from the counter and threw it. It smashed against the wall, joining the ghost of Isara's vase. "You lied. You lied about everything. You said your parents were dead. You said you were alone. Who is Isara? Why did she call herself your wife?" Caleb reached for her, but she recoiled. "Mia, please. I did it for us. I ran away from them because they were toxic. I wanted a life with you. A real life. A real life built on a fake name." Mia cried. "Does Leo even have a real last name? Is our marriage even legal?" Caleb went silent. That silence was the loudest answer he could have given. Mia collapsed onto a chair, burying her face in her hands. "You're bigamist. You're a fraud. And we're broke." "We're not broke," Caleb said desperately. "I can fix this. I can talk to Isara. She used to love me. I can convince her." "She hates you, Caleb," Mia said, lifting her head. Her eyes were red, but they were clear. "I saw her eyes. She doesn't want your money. She wants your soul. And honestly, I think she deserves it." Mia stood up. She wiped her face with her apron. "Where are you going?" Caleb asked, panic rising in his chest. "I'm going upstairs to pack a bag for Leo," Mia said, her voice dead. "We're going to my sister's in Lyon." "No. Mia, you can't leave me. Not now. I need you." "You need a lawyer," Mia said, walking to the stairs. "And you need a baker. Because it looks like you have a lot of debt to pay off, and you're going to have to do it alone." She walked up the stairs, leaving Caleb standing in the wreckage of his simple life. Outside, in the black town car, Isara watched the lights go out in the upstairs apartment. She saw a silhouette moving past the window. "Drive, Elias," she whispered. "Where to, madam?" "The airport," Isara said. "I have a board meeting in New York on Monday, and I want to be there when Beatrix tries to explain why she flew to France for a croissant." She leaned back in the seat. Her heart was still cold, still heavy. But for the first time in 7 years, it wasn't beating with grief. It was beating with the steady, rhythmic pulse of vindication. Caleb was alive. But Jean-Luc? Jean-Luc was dead. Isara had killed him without lifting a finger. For 3 weeks, Caleb Valerius learned the true definition of hell. It wasn't fire and brimstone. It was flour and yeast. Isara had been right. Without the Aries Trust cushion, Le Petit Matin was not a charming artisan shop. It was a sinking ship that required 18 hours of labor a day just to keep the water level at his neck. Caleb woke at 3:30 a.m. every morning. His hands, once manicured and used only for signing documents or holding champagne flutes, were now raw, cracked, and permanently stained with grease. He worked alone. He couldn't afford the staff he had fired the day Isara cut the funding. He mixed the dough in the silence of the pre-dawn dark, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the mixer sounding like a slow, mocking heartbeat. He missed Mia. He missed Leo. The apartment upstairs was silent. Mia had left that night, taking the boy to Lyon. She refused to answer his calls. She refused to let him explain why his name wasn't Jean-Luc. The silence upstairs was heavier than the 50-kilo flour sacks he dragged across the floor. "1 baguette, please," a regular customer asked one Tuesday morning. eyeing Caleb's unshaven face and bloodshot eyes. "You look tired, Jean-Luc." "I am fine," Caleb snapped, shoving the bread into a bag with too much force, tearing the paper. He froze, staring at the rip. It was such a small thing, a torn bag. But it broke him. He slammed the baguette onto the counter. "I am fine," he screamed, his voice cracking. The customer backed away, leaving a euro coin on the counter and fleeing without his bread. Caleb sank to the floor behind the counter, burying his face in his hands. He smelled like sweat and stale sugar. He looked at the invoice taped to the register, the payment schedule Isara's lawyers had sent. He had to pay 4,000 euros by Friday or face immediate foreclosure. He had 600 euros. He looked around his prison. The peeling paint, the humming fridge, the life he had chosen to escape the pressure of the boardroom. Isara had turned his sanctuary into a torture chamber. "She wants me to break," Caleb whispered to the empty room. "She wants me to beg." A flash of the old Caleb, the arrogant heir who had been raised to believe the world owed him everything, flickered to life in the darkness. He stood up. He wiped his hands on his filthy apron. Isara Valerius thought she held all the cards because she had the checkbook. But she forgot one thing. He was still her husband. They never divorced. There was no prenuptial agreement because their families were equally wealthy. Technically, he owned half of everything she had built while he was dead. He walked to the back office and picked up the phone. He didn't call Mia. He didn't call his mother. He called the only person in New York who hated Isara as much as he currently did, Marcus Sterling, a rival attorney who had been trying to sue the Valerius Group for years. "Mr. Sterling," Caleb said when the line connected, his voice regaining a shred of its old arrogance. "You don't know me, but I believe you represent the opposition in the antitrust case against Valerius Group. My name is Caleb Valerius, and I'm not as dead as everyone thinks." Little did he know, he wasn't calling for a rescue. He was calling for his own execution. The boardroom of the Valerius Group headquarters in Manhattan was a fortress of glass and steel, floating 50 stories above the chaos of the city. It smelled of lemon polish and fear. Isara sat at the head of the table. She looked impeccable in a navy suit, her hair sleek, her face a mask of bored indifference. To her right sat her general counsel. To her left, an empty chair. The doors opened. Caleb walked in. He had cleaned up. He had shaved, cut his hair, and bought a suit with the last of his credit card limit. He looked like a Valerius again, almost. But Isara saw the tremors in his hands. She saw the way his eyes darted around the room, looking for a trap. Behind him walked Marcus Sterling, a shark in a pinstripe suit, grinning like he had just won the lottery. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Mr. Valerius," Isara said, not standing up. "Isara," Caleb nodded, sitting at the opposite end of the table. "You look prosperous. And you look like you owe me rent," Isara replied, tapping her pen on the table. "Why are you here, Caleb? You should be proofing sourdough." "I'm here for what's mine," Caleb said, his voice gaining strength from Sterling's presence. "I spoke to Mr. Sterling. Since I never legally died, our marriage is still valid, which means I am entitled to 50% of all assets acquired during the marriage. That includes the growth of the Valerius Group over the last 7 years." He leaned forward. "You built an empire, Isara. Good job. Now give me half." Sterling chimed in, sliding a thick document across the mahogany table. "We are prepared to file for divorce immediately, citing abandonment and financial abuse. Unless, of course, you want to settle. We are asking for $2 billion and full reinstatement of his trust fund." Isara looked at the document. She didn't pick it up. She looked at Caleb. "You faked your death," she said softly. "You put me through a murder investigation. You abandoned your wife. And now you want to be paid for it." "I want my share," Caleb said, his jaw tight. "I'm a victim here, too. You cut off my funds. You tried to starve me." "I tried to make you a man," Isara corrected. "Clearly, I failed." She turned to her lawyer. "Show them." Her lawyer opened a folder and placed a single piece of paper in the center of the table. It wasn't a legal briefing. It was a photocopy of a handwritten letter. "What is this?" Sterling asked, frowning. "It's a codicil to Magnus Valerius's will," Isara said, dated 3 weeks before he died. "Read paragraph 4. Caleb pulled the paper toward him. He read the words in his father's familiar scrawl. "In the event that my son, Caleb Valerius, is found to be alive, he shall be considered legally disinherited from the Valerius estate entirely. Furthermore, Any assets he attempts to claim through marriage shall be null and void, as his disappearance constitutes a constructive divorce and abandonment under the morality clause of the family charter. Caleb stopped reading. The room spun. The morality clause, Sterling muttered, his smile vanishing. I didn't know the charter had one. It does, Isara said. Magnus added it specifically for you, Caleb. He knew you'd come back for the money. He knew you were greedy. So he built a wall you couldn't climb. This is fake, Caleb stammered. Dad wouldn't do this. Dad hated cowardice, Caleb. And you were the definition of it. Isara stood up. You have no claim. You have no money. You have no wife, because I filed for an annulment based on fraud this morning. You are nothing. Sterling closed his briefcase. The sound was like a gavel. I can't represent you, Mr. Valerius, Sterling said, standing up. This case is a loser. And frankly, I don't work on contingency for disinherited bakers. Marcus, wait. Caleb grabbed his arm. We can fight this. The clause might not hold up in court. It will, Sterling said, shaking him off. Magnus Valerius wrote ironclad wills. Good luck with the croissants. Sterling walked out, leaving Caleb alone at the long table, facing the woman he had underestimated for a decade. Isara walked slowly down the length of the room until she stood over him. You have two choices, Caleb, she said. He looked up, his eyes wet. He looked so small. Choice one, Isara said. You stay in New York. I sue you for the back rent on the bakery, the legal fees for the investigation, and the emotional distress of the last 7 years. I will bankrupt you so thoroughly you won't be able to afford a subway ticket. Caleb swallowed hard. And choice two, Isara said, placing a single plane ticket on the table. You go back to France. You apologize to Mia. You beg her to take you back, not as Caleb Valerius, but as the broke baker she fell in love with. You work in that shop. You pay your debt to me, month by month, euro by euro. You live the simple life you claimed you wanted. She leaned down, her face inches from his. But you never, ever speak my name again. You never claimed to be a Valerius. You are Jean-Luc now. Permanently. Caleb looked at the ticket. Economy class. One way to Lion. He looked at the boardroom. The power, the wealth, the legacy he had been born into. It was all right there. And it was completely out of reach. Why, he whispered. Why give me a chance? Because of the boy, Isara said, her voice softening just a fraction. Leo deserves a father. Even a weak one is better than a ghost. She turned and walked toward the door. You have 1 hour to get to JFK, Jean-Luc. Don't miss your flight. I hear the traffic is terrible. Caleb sat there for a long moment. He touched the mahogany table one last time. Then he picked up the ticket. He stood up, stripped off the expensive suit jacket, and left it on the chair. He walked out of the room in his shirt sleeves, shivering slightly in the air conditioning. Isara watched him go from the security monitor in her office. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just watched the ghost finally fade away. She picked up her phone. Elias. Yes, madam. Send a gift basket to Mia in Lion. Toys for the boy. And include the deed to the bakery. Put it in her name. Only hers. You're forgiving the debt, madam? No, Isara said, looking out at the skyline of the city she ruled. I'm transferring the asset to someone who actually knows how to work for it. Caleb can work for her now. She hung up. She checked her heart. It was light. It was free. Welcome home, Isara, she whispered to the empty room. And for the first time in 7 years, she really meant it. The apartment in Lion was small, smelling of damp plaster and boiled cabbage, a far cry from the lavender fields of St. Savon. Mia sat at the wobbly kitchen table, watching Leo push a toy car across the linoleum floor. Her eyes were dry. She had run out of tears somewhere on the A7 motorway 3 weeks ago. There was a knock at the door. Not the rhythmic, arrogant knock of a landlord, but the hesitant, terrified knock of a man who knows he isn't welcome. Mia didn't move. She knew who it was. She had ignored his 37 missed calls. She had ignored the voicemails begging for a chance to explain why he was in New York. Mia? Caleb's voice came through the wood, muffled and thick with exhaustion. Please. I know you're in there. I saw Leo's scooter in the hall. Leo looked up, his eyes lighting up. Papa. Mia stood up, her legs feeling like lead. She walked to the door and opened it. Caleb stood there. He looked like a ghost who had been exorcised and then dragged back to the living world against his will. His suit jacket was gone. His shirt was wrinkled, stained with sweat. He held a crumpled paper bag in one hand, a peace offering of cheap pastries from the train station. "I'm back," he whispered, trying to smile. It was a grotesque expression. "I saw her. She let me go. It's over, Mia. The trust, the debt, the threats, it's all over. We can go home." "Home?" Mia asked, blocking the doorway with her body. "To the bakery you don't own? To the life built on lies? You went to New York to fight her, didn't you? To get money." Caleb flinched. "I went to secure our future. But I realized money doesn't matter without you." "Liar," Mia said simply. "You came back because you lost. I can see it in your face. You look like a dog that got kicked." She started to close the door. "Wait. Mia, please. I have nowhere else to go. I have no money. I have no passport. Well, I have Jean-Luc's. But, please. For Leo." Mia looked down at her son, who had run to the door and was hugging Caleb's knees, oblivious to the fact that his father was a fraud. Before she could answer, a delivery courier appeared in the hallway behind Caleb. "Delivery from Madame Mia Moreau?" the courier asked, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. The wax bore a crest, a lion, the Valerius seal. Caleb froze. He recognized that seal. Mia took the envelope. Her hands trembled as she broke the wax. She pulled out a stack of legal documents bound in blue ribbon. And on top, a handwritten note on stationery that smelled of expensive perfume. "My dear Mia, a king is only as strong as the people he serves. Your husband forgot that. He thought he was royalty, but he is merely a baker. He needs a boss. Enclosed is the deed to Le Petit Matin. The mortgage has been paid in full. The lien is dissolved. The property is yours. Not Jean-Luc's. Not the trust's. Yours. He will return to you. He is nowhere else. When he does, do not let him rule. Make him work. He owes a debt to the universe, and I believe you are the best person to collect it. Be the oak. I saw a Valerius." Mia read the note twice. Then she looked at the deed. "Owner, Mia Moreau." She looked up at Caleb. He was eyeing the envelope with terror. "What is it?" he whispered. "Is it an eviction?" Mia smiled. It wasn't her usual soft, accommodating smile. It was sharper, stronger, a reflection of the woman in the white suit who had stormed their bakery weeks ago. "No," Mia said, stepping back and allowing him to enter the apartment. "It's an employment contract." She tossed the deed onto the table. "You can come home, Jean-Luc. But you're sleeping in the guest room. And tomorrow morning? You open the shop at 4 a.m. I sleep until 7 o'clock. Caleb looked at the deed, then at his wife. He realized the power dynamic had shifted permanently. He wasn't the protector anymore. He was the employee. "Okay," he whispered, head bowed. "Okay." 3 months later, Isara Valerius stood on the balcony of her penthouse in Manhattan. The city was a grid of light and noise below her, a testament to human ambition. The air was cold, signaling the arrival of autumn. Isara wrapped her cashmere shawl tighter around her shoulders. She held a glass of Pinot Noir, the dark liquid reflecting the city lights. Her phone buzzed on the railing. It was a report from Elias. Subject: Monthly Update, Saint Savon. Asset: Le Petit Matin status, operational. Notes: Revenue is up 15%. Mia Moreau has expanded the menu. Jean-Luc Moreau was observed cleaning the grease trap yesterday. He appears to have lost weight. No attempts to contact press or family. He attends church with his wife and son every Sunday. Isara swiped the message away. She didn't delete it. She archived it. A reminder. She looked out at the skyline. For 7 years, she had looked at this view and felt an emptiness so vast it threatened to swallow her whole. She had felt like a placeholder in her own life, waiting for a ghost to return and tell her she was allowed to be happy. Now, the ghost was gone, exorcised by the truth. She wasn't waiting anymore. She thought of Magnus, the old man who had loved her enough to give her the weapon she needed to save herself. He hadn't left her the company just to make her rich. He had left it to her because he knew she was the only one strong enough to survive the wreckage of his son. "Thank you, old man," she whispered to the wind. She touched the pearls at her throat, not nervously this time, but affectionately. They were no longer a noose linking her to the past. They were just pearls. Beautiful. Cold. Hers. Isara turned her back on the city view. She walked back into the warmth of her penthouse, the glass doors sliding shut behind her, sealing out the noise, the cold, and the memory of a man who had chosen to be small. She placed her glass on the table and picked up a file for a new acquisition in Tokyo. The Valerius Group was expanding. There were new worlds to conquer, new empires to build. And somewhere in France, a baker was waking up in the dark to knead dough for a woman who finally knew her worth. The scales were balanced. Hi, my beautiful family. We have reached the end of this journey together. We have walked through the rain in France, stood in the cold interrogation rooms of the past, and sat in the boardrooms where justice was finally served. Take a deep breath with me. Inhale and exhale. Let the tension leave your shoulders. This story was heavy. It was a story about betrayal, yes. But more importantly, it was a story about worth. Caleb Valerius didn't leave because Isara wasn't enough. He left because he couldn't handle the weight of his own life. He chose the easy path. He chose to run. And in doing so, he tried to make Isara carry the burden he dropped. But little did he know, you cannot break a woman who has already forged herself in the fire. Isara didn't just survive him. She outgrew him. She learned that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying someone. It's letting them be exactly who they are, while you go on to be everything they were too afraid to become. If this story spoke to you, if you have ever felt abandoned, underestimated, or forced to carry a weight that wasn't yours, I want you to know, you are the oak. You are strong. You are still standing. Protect your peace, family, because no one else will do it for you. Until next time, I love you. Mr. James out.